Good morning and thank you for joining me for today's review for Orbit 1 by Mel Jay. This was a book voted for by my intrepid viewers after I'd finished my eye challenge of a single book. Orbit 1 by Mel Jay, came up as the most voted for. So what I've got here is this really beautiful old book. And I will admit that it was the book itself and the cover. Look at that fantastic cover. It's by Jack Faragasso. Jack Faragasso. That was probably why I bought this one, and I love that. I think it's called block printing, red edge pages. The whole thing is quite gorgeous. So it was 60 cents when it first came out. It's an MB publication. It's got one of those tiny little ISBN or pre-SBNs there. And in this reflective light, you can see where I removed the nasty sticky cover. I don't have that much skill. This one is a McFadden book by McFadden Bartel Corporation. That's what that MB is. And it was published in 1970. But it was originally copyright 1966 by Arcadia House, according to this. That might be US edition. Mel Jay sounds like a pseudonym. Oh, by the way, thank you for everyone who voted this one. It looks dodgy. It would have sat on that shelf for a long time before I got around to it. In fact, I suspect it already had sat on that shelf for a long time. I really can't remember when I purchased this one. But it would have been pretty cheap when I did, I suspect. So Mel Jay, you just look at that author and you know that's a pseudonym for someone, isn't it? No one lives their life. No one calls their precious newborn Mel Jay, and no one lives their life with that name. However, many people do write with that sort of name. And in this case, ISFDB took me to the summary biographies of Robert Lionel Fanthorpe and Patricia Alice Fanthorpe, both born in the 30s. And both UK authors, which might be the discrepancy in that 1966 publication, when it seems possible that it was first printed in 1962. I'm not swearing to that, but it just seems possible. So Mel Jay is an alternative name or pseudonym used by both those people, and often both those people together. Because if you look them up, you'll see they had a massive number of books, which they also wrote together. And I think that comes through quite strongly in the writing and reading experience of Orbit 1. So what is Orbit 1? The book, as it is. We start on the planet of Kola in the faraway 30th century, where they still use primitive phones without visual screens on those far distant colony planets. And some people are shocked to learn they still use tractors and old school technology, some of which we don't have anymore, some of which we still do. Now we start with a proto-colonist who is ploughing his field, musing about the mystery of whether there had or had not been on Kola an intelligent intelligent life before they came. We learn a lot about the colony and proto-colonists. The proto-colonists are a group of people who sign up to be sent to various planets that might be worthy of colonization. They try it for a few years. If so, it's opened up for colonization, and the proto-colonists are either offered a stake on that planet or they move on to a new one. It sounds like it's a really fairly well, if basically established premise for a futuristic society. And I would guess that the Fanthorpes had used that before. Maybe other people were using it as well. I don't think I've ever read anything by the Fanthorpes before, so I don't know. Anyhow, the notion of intelligent life, yes or no, is based on these weird grey ashy mounds that are found all over the planet, interspersed with fissures. And the idea is that maybe there'd been intelligent life associated, but no one has actually identified as such. And proto-colony planets are owned by specific organization, as I understand it, and investors. There aren't any archaeologists there. No one's investigating. They're just wondering about it. Anyhow, while this guy, whose name I've temporarily forgotten, is ploughing his fields on his tractor. Then he suddenly sees above him the spaceship-ish Dan, Big Dan, is ploughing his proto-colony ships. Big Dan Jeffries suddenly looks up to see the ship, spaceship, definitely interplanetary possibility, is used to hop around the world by the proto-colony administrator Fletcher Starbuck. I kid you not. They named their administrator Fletcher Starbuck. That's so cute. Anyhow, he looks up, he sees this ship, I'm pretty sure it has a name which I've forgotten, and all of a sudden something seems to go wrong. It's a bit wonky, it's a bit wobbly, and comes crashing down next to a fissure not too far away from him. Now Big Dan Fletcher heads over there. He calls it in to the administrator's office. Presumably the administrator knows about it personally. And then he heads over there and he finds the wreckage of this starship, but he can't find a body. And then the cop in charge of the colony, IPF, stands for some kind of cop, whose name is... what is his name? I wrote it down somewhere. It doesn't matter. Let's just call him IPF or cop. And he heads over there with the assistant administrator, who might be called Watting or something like that. There's a B and a W name in there somewhere. And they too can't find the administrator's body, but they think maybe he's dead, so the assistant administrator takes over the admin. Now, before things can stew down very much, all of a sudden there's this anonymous warning comes through, I think it's the telephone, about high radiation. You must take action. So the assistant administrator, who I think is Walcott, that's it, Walcott, and the IPF cop called Bridger, notify warnings about radiation throughout the colony, and everyone puts on their suits. Next thing you know, they get a tiny little message in a bottle thrown through the window from nowhere, warning about fire and floods. And that happens too. So you've got radiation, hurricanes, fire, floods, volcanoes, a whole heap of natural disasters dashing down through the planet, keeping them on their toes. And finally they start to think this... they decide to investigate it further, and that ends up with them going down the fissures, finding out more about what's under there, and all the rest is spoilers, which I will spoil later. But let's talk about a few things first. Let's talk about the writing. The writing is bad. There is a reason why Orbit 1 is not widely heard of, and I suspect there's a reason why I've never heard anyone else talk about Mel Jay as an author. The Fanthorpes I'm not sure about. I think I have read some of theirs. Let's turn to Goodreads, as I do every now and then. Orbit 1 has an average of just over 2 stars ratings. 14 ratings in total, with 6 reviews. Shortly to be 7. Maybe, if I can be bothered giving Amazon more credit in life. In general, though, they're pretty bad. Not a single person gave this 5 stars. One gave it 5 stars. I'd probably say based on personal enjoyability. Like myself, other people have picked it up purely for the cover and the blurb, which is actually pretty good. Somewhere in the depths of space, a strange intelligence was directing the destruction of the little band of humans on Kolar. So far, the colonists had been beset by fires and floods, hurricanes and tidal waves. Glenn Bridger, their leader, no, he's a cop, knew these catastrophes were occurring too often to be the work of Mother Nature. There's no mother on this planet. But the new planet had been explored and was completely uninhabited, as far as we know, except for those fissures which no one had looked into. Kolar must be concealing some alien life force, but where? Yeah, okay, that blurb's incorrect, but pretty good. Now, this book bore lots of signs of having been written fast for word count without editing. And in hindsight, the fact that it was written by 2 people comes across quite evidently. You've got small bits where there's actually relatability, such as the beginning section with Big Dan Jeffries. I actually like that character, and I was enjoying that first bit. It seemed as if whoever wrote that first bit was actually a little bit engaged. Large portions of the rest of it were unengaging, and clearly unengaged by the person writing it. And I could read a paragraph. I actually noted one down here as being particularly woeful. It's at the top of page 108, and it goes, Starbuck was like a man in a daze. It was like following a robot, like following an automaton, like following some kind of servo mechanism. It was uncanny, really. It was like being on the trail of a zombie. There could have been word cuts there. There could have been editing. If you have to say the same thing again with every single reference, I think you're being paid by the word. And I'm not sure these guys were, because I don't know how the payment system in the 60s went for UK authors, but from their prolific output, this was a job. And at that point, page 108, this was a job that whoever was writing it was not loving. And I, as a reader, was not loving either. So overall, it is kind of fun. You've got that time-space adventure, planetary romance. Is that the word? I think that's the word Robin from Bookspin used when we were talking about another one. It's got a very dated exposition style. One comment about radiation levels, followed by a full page talking about the individual's opinions about war and wartime mentality for all of eternity. It's like, nah. Does not work. It felt like some of it was tongue-in-cheek, and the other times the author was barely taking it seriously, and other times it had moments where the authors were actually seemed to be enjoying what they were writing about. The characterization was appalling. They were all the big He-Man competent men. Something beginning with B, the cop guy. Bridger was... Anything you've ever read about the competent man in any book, including Heinlein, is in Bridger, only not well written compared to some of the other ones. Often contradictory. And... oh yes, let's talk about the women characters. Can be summed up in one page. What women characters? You mean there's women in the human race? Not a thing that bothers me in general. But there were so many other things bothering me that I had time to pause and think about it. I don't know how you send proto-colonists to a planet only men. Gotta say, not a long-term proposition. So, okay, early on there's one where Walcott is talking to a crowd of colonists. Then suddenly a doctor pushes out of the crowd, open his medical case, and gives Walcott an injection in the most... It was the most WTF scene, and that was early on, that was page 95, and by now I'd realised no one bothered to edit this. We later found out that this doctor came through the crowd with his medical case to inject his way into Walcott, because Walcott had fainted, but we weren't told then, we were told later. So 1 minute Walcott's talking to this angry crowd who's unhappy about all the disturbances happening on their planet. Next thing you've got the doctor injecting him with something. It was weird. It was poorly edited. And that was when I thought, possibly no one edited this at all. I had later reasons to confirm that opinion. Okay, then page 104. Got a sergeant knocks onto a door, and then we go into a long explanation about colonial roads. And this happened all the time. A thing happened, the rest of the page was the person to whom it happened thinking about something entirely unrelated that could have fit into the story and might have been meaningful, but was not in its right place. And yet, despite all this, the writing isn't actively terrible. I've read worse books. I've seen other people read worse books. The writing was competent of people who knew how to write. They just didn't care for this one at all. And I've got a quote here from page 47. He had a sound, practical, very compensatory common sense. In fact, he had so much of it that it was almost uncommon sense. So yeah, the person who wrote that had a sense of humor and knew how to write, and they knew words above one syllable. So all of those are good things, but they really didn't care about this book. And the main Easter egg, so from now on it's spoilers. I reckon anyone who's watching this has probably decided whether or not they're going to want to read this or not. And if you own it and were thinking of reading it, you may want it to fill an afternoon, or you may just hang on to it for that gorgeous cover. Great cover. Well done, you. Well done, you, Jack Faragasso. I don't think I know that painter. Yes, so where were we? It turns out, as you'd have gotten from my quote from page 108, that yes, indeed, Starbuck is alive. But we knew that from page 90 just about, because all of these uncommon warnings that are coming, it's not secretive that they have to be from him. It's obvious from the get-go. It's obvious to us, and if those competent men were real human beings, they'd know it as well. So Starbuck vanishes, then we get this phone call that Walcott and Bridgerton, or is it Walcott, whatever they're called, Cop and Walcott and Bridger, they listen to it together on speakerphone in the 60s. And the voice sounds slightly familiar, like someone's trying to conceal their voice. Who could it be? And then later, when they have the thrown message through the window, oh, did you think the writing looked slightly familiar? Yes, it did look slightly familiar, but I couldn't place it. Please. So obviously Starbuck is alive. What ends up happening is Bridger, in a few scenes that could have been really exciting adventure and actually were pretty good in their own way, he takes his ship following the hovercraft of Starbuck after he's been seen in the crowd. So he follows them to this fissure. He goes down the fissure on the rope. This is very superficial to what happened. And he finds himself in a whole alien warren. Yes, there was intelligent life on Kolar, which, by the way, circles Sirius. We were talking about Sirius the dog star just a while ago online. And it turns out that what they decide has happened. Starbuck went down there exploring one day. He came to this computer AI intelligent mind that's running the underground of everything and gets hooked in, so he becomes a controlled zombie-like mechanism. He's forced to fake his own death, to go down there and start spreading these natural disasters, which he can do because there's all this machinery that controls the weather, which Bridger recognizes because they've got very similar stuff on Earth. I mean, whatever. And it turns out that his hypothesis is that this alien race all went to sleep in order to survive something, leaving the AI computer mind in control to wake them up when it was safe to do so. The AI mind was contacted by an intelligence, that's Fletcher. I assume that this book, Mel Jay, is giving us the gossip that intelligence is part of humanity. You wouldn't know it from the contents, but there you go. Starbuck contacts the AI. The AI realizes it's time to wake up all his people, but before he has to do that, he has to clear these parasitic forms of humanity from the face of the earth, and that's what he's doing with the radiations and the volcanoes and the floods and all the rest of it. There is an ending, and I've got to say it's very, very forgettable. It's perhaps a bit dramatic. One person of those 6 reviews online actually liked the ending. I feel that I will have forgotten the ending and most of the contents of this book within a week. And this review is for future Deb, who may want to remember what it was all about. Possibly the review in the Goodreads if I do it, and definitely the review in my reading journal. Yeah, so not a good book. Great cover. Not a bad concept. Poor execution. I feel like the Fanthorpes themselves would not think that this was their best work. They've done a lot of work. I'm sure some of it's better. I might even read it, more of it, if I find it. Mel Jay or other pseudonyms. They've got so many pseudonyms. They've got like dozens of books, but there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8. There's something 40 or 50 pseudonyms these guys used. I'm sure I've read some of them actually. I just haven't sat down and counted them. So, not the worst book I've ever read by any means. As a write by numbers, pay by the word type book, still not the worst I've ever read. Even though they didn't care, they didn't edit, they didn't try very hard. Orbit 1 is not a 1-star read. I'd give it 2 stars out of 5, Goodreads scale. In terms of the 20-point scale, I haven't really thought about it on that one. It would never score high. This is not a book that I wanted to keep on reading. It's a book I kept on reading because it was there. The same way that if you've got a cheap pizza in front of you, you will keep on eating it because it's pizza and it's there, unlike that really delicious homemade pizza which you eat because every mouthful is a delight. This was not a delight, but it wasn't too terrible. I'm glad I read it. It's off the to-read shelf and onto the red shelf. Read, as in I have already read this book. You got it. Okay. What next? So, whilst you wonderful people were voting for what I should read next, there were a number of votes for P.D. James' Cover Her Face, an English murder mystery. I've read P.D. James before, and I have even read another, this is Detective Chief Inspector Adam Dalgleish, and I've read them before, so I'm probably going to go onto this book. I expect to enjoy it. P.D. James writes well. And after that, who knows? I hear in the background you might see my copy of Niftaline. Wheel of Genre Boys and I did discuss reading it this month. I haven't heard from them for a while. They may be too busy. And right here above you can see my ABC challenge. Next thing, I'll be going on to something beginning with K. Luckily, I've got quite a few books whose authors' names begin with K. Thank you for listening to me ramble on about Orbit 1. If you have it and you have read it, you are in a minority of the % of people on Goodreads and the planet. But let me tell you, do come here and tell me what you thought of it. Have a great day and read good books.